I got to a point where I was almost not able to provide my services to leaders and teams because I was so cynical, bitter, angry,
Mhm.
disillusioned with this thing called leadership and management, which is what I've researched and practiced with all my life. And I had a choice. I realized I had a choice at that point. I could either continue to embody all of that negative energy, and that was who I was becoming professionally and personally, or I could choose to change.
Hello, and welcome back to Culture in Action. I'm Luke Fisher, CEO of H.U.M.A.N. My guest today is Dr. Jeanne Hardacre. She's an author, advisor, and someone who spent her career helping leaders and teams unlock better ways of working together. Jeanne's new book, The Culture Trap, tackles something many of us recognise: when we know culture needs to change, but we feel stuck or powerless to do anything about it. In this conversation, she unpacks how the trap forms and what we can do to get out of it. We talk about her H.U.M.A.N framework, the myths that hold culture back, and how small intentional experiments in our day-to-day interactions can shift the dynamic of the whole team. So I had the luxury of going to see Brené Brown when I was in Las Vegas, and she said a really powerful question, and it's something that I've carried with me ever since, which is, let's start with who you are and not what you do. So what should our listeners know about you beyond what they might read as your title on your LinkedIn profile?
Thank you, Luke. I'm also passionate about moving away from titles and focusing in on what do I do and what's my purpose in the world, I guess. And in front of me, you won't be able to see this, but is a poster that I use. I have it on my office wall, and it is by Mike Levy, who's an artist in Brighton. And it's a cartoon of a woman with no clothes on a bicycle.
Okay.
And it says, be free.
Okay. Very
And
cool.
if I were to share anything with people about who I really am, that's it. It's about being free. And it's not an irony or a coincidence that my book is called The Culture Trap,
Yeah.
because that's something we can free ourselves from. And beyond me being free and finding my way to be free, I now work with teams and leaders, and have done for many years, to help embolden them to find their freedom at work, oftentimes in situations where they feel anything but free.
Yeah, I can imagine. So tell us about the culture trap. Tell us about why now, and ultimately, what's the book about?
Mm. So I suppose my first experience of what I've now started to call the culture trap was in my mid-20s. So we're talking quite a long time ago now, where I was on a prestigious management training scheme, don't you know,
Okay.
in the UK, with a potential pathway to be a chief exec in 15 years.
Okay.
And what I realized in my gut, and I could not put my finger on anything at the time, I couldn't articulate it, but I just had this sense of unease. And what I think I was realizing was that I was being trained as a manager, and what I was being trained to do was to do things right according to what was expected. And more, I realized that that was different from the right thing to do.
Okay.
Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah,
So
I think so.
I found myself feeling compromised a lot of the time in terms of what I really believed would be the right thing to do in a particular situation, and what I was being trained and rewarded for doing, which was different from that.
Yeah. No, that makes it. I can appreciate that situation because you often, especially in early stage management, you observe a lot of behaviors, and the perception of what is right versus what morally or from a value standpoint feels right to you,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
especially when I remember joining an organization that was a very large organization, but hundreds of thousands of people in it,
Sure.
and being in a position in which the world has moved on from some of the people that were setting the standard for what good looked like then. And I
Uh-huh.
remember thinking about the approach and thinking, wow, this just should be done in such a different way for the benefit of the people and for the benefit of the business. And I guess in
Sure.
some respects that is what you do feel trapped between what is right and what you think you should be doing. So
Hmm.
yeah, interesting. Okay. Sorry,
And
carry
I
on.
guess it came to, there was a real catalyst, Luke, that over after many years, which I won't go into everything that I did and sort of roles I had, but in 2018 there was a real catalyst moment for me, and by then I'd been running my own consultancy for 15 years,
Okay.
working with thousands of managers, leaders, teams. And one of the people that I love most in the whole world, and I'm lucky to have several people I love hugely, but one of them became suicidal as a direct result of becoming a whistleblower, almost feeling they had no choice but to blow the whistle, and the stress that resulted from that. And the impact that had on them and me and our wider family. Devastating is an overused term, but it literally pulled the rug from out under our lives. And I do still have to be careful talking about it because I'm still subject to a gagging NDA around all of that, which is often what happens with whistleblowing. And people say that you write the book you need. And I got to a point where I was almost not able to provide my services to leaders and teams because I was so cynical, bitter, angry, disillusioned with this thing called leadership and management, which is what I've researched and practiced with all my life. And I had a choice. I realized I had a choice at that point. I could either continue to embody all of that negative energy, and that was who I was becoming professionally and personally, or I could choose to change. And the change had to start here. And that change process began by me starting to write. And that was the beginning of the book, which became an approach which I have embodied into my own life and work, and I am now sharing with others because it has been so powerful as a way of escaping from that utter despair and sense of powerlessness that sometimes work can leave us with.
Yeah, indeed. I imagine the process for you was almost therapeutic in many respects to just get out what you were thinking, feeling, what needed to change, how that could do, how your experiences and the research that you've done in your past can apply new situations and
Mm.
propose ways to handle things differently. Do you get to the end? Final word is written, typed probably, and is in a position where you think, okay, this is done. How has that journey then changed you personally? You come out the back of that process, and what does the evolved version of you look like now as a consequence of the process?
The the key change is that I have let go of something really that was holding me back, and that I see in so many leaders and teams I work with. And I've let go of wishing, if only.
Yeah,
If only he would change, if only she would stop doing that, and if only they would X, Y, Z,
yeah,
A, B, C. If only. Then the first part of my book is a description of 30 years of if only. I spent 30 years in an if only mindset.
hmm,
And inadvertently, what I was doing was I was giving away my power to shape and change things by wishing everyone else would be different. Does
yeah.
that make sense?
Yeah, entirely. I mean, I'm a relatively simple being, but I always come back to spheres of influence, like what's in your control, what can you influence, what do you have no control over. I infuriate my wife as a consequence of living by that mantra
Yeah.
because I can very quickly compartmentalize, and either I'm in control of it and therefore I can do something about it, or I
Yeah.
can't. And letting go of that is both really powerful and infuriating for other people, I've
Yeah.
since learned.
Yeah.
But I it resonates strongly with me for sure.
And it's also an uncomfortable thing to let go of, because as long as I'm holding on to if only they would change because they're the problem,
Mm.
I can kind of sidestep the fact that I personally might be contributing to some of these dynamics.
Yeah.
And what was really the curiosity, Luke, that has fueled me through many, many years of my work is how is it that people who view themselves as decent, good people
Yeah.
with the best of intentions, working really hard, somehow manage to create together an experience of work that is maybe less than enjoyable? It might be tense, it might be troubled, it might be even toxic. How does that happen?
Mm.
And once I started to understand how that happens, why we as human beings behave that way, and why we create these dynamics and relationships and ways of interacting at work between ourselves the way we do, we can then choose whether that's what we want or whether we want to shape something different. But we need to understand why and how we're creating that in the first place.
Yeah, indeed.
And that is the culture trap. The culture trap is when we're locked into this set of behaviors and dynamics that unknowingly are kind of trapping us into a way of being together. But none of us really want it. None of us like it. And everybody wishes it would change.
Yeah.
That's the trap.
Yeah.
And so the human approach I've developed helps us to release ourselves from that culture trap.
Yeah. Okay. So the heart of the book is around a framework called H.U.M.A.N, aptly named. Do you mind just walking us through the very essence of the framework, what it stands for, what these principles really mean in the context of workplace culture?
Sure. And I suppose I would just nudge us into calling them practices rather
Okay.
than principles. And the reason, I don't mean to be semantic, but one of the things that I got really disillusioned with was how much we can think and be clever intellectually about culture. We can analyze it, understand it, we can program manage our way through it, we can create Gantt charts for it, we can quote gurus about it. But
Really doing it.
none of that actually changes it.
Yeah.
And so the book is unapologetically practical, and it is packed full of practices that you can choose to try. And so the human practices are revolved around that acronym H.U.M.A.N. And, you know, people might want to make a note of this because it's the headlines of the framework. The H is honest. And that sounds so simple. Just be honest. But it is so hard to be honest at work a lot of the time. And this isn't just about saying whatever you think or feel. That's not the honesty we're talking about. We're talking about humble honesty about human nature. It's about owning and recognizing why we as humans behave as we do, sometimes with amazing impact and sometimes with the opposite. And each and every one of us is capable of hugely positive impact on others. And I believe every single one of us in certain conditions is capable of some really harmful behavior. And when we can start being honest about that and not pretending, we can open up all sorts of new conversations with a level of vulnerability and truth that take us so far further in what we're trying to achieve for our clients or our customers or the people we serve. And it's about being honest about how people respond under pressure and really understanding human nature in that respect and moving away from what I call the pattern of pretense, where we seem to think it's the right thing to do to pretend that, yes, I'm professional, we're strong, we're all on the same page. You know, we're good people, we're not the problem. It's all a pretense because that's not real, that's not human. And so once we can understand how to be honest about all of this, it unlocks the possibilities for our culture in just ways that have been hugely surprising to me.
Yeah, I think the thing for me, as I listen to you speak, is that Radical Candor was a good book I enjoyed, but it often feels about other people
Yes,
rather than the truth of it. The hard bit is being honest with, like, why am I being like this? Like, I can
yes,
feel I'm being difficult, but I'm stuck now and I have to
yes,
therefore be difficult. Like, why am I doing this? What is leading me to do that? And I think
absolutely.
it's often the if only mindset, it feels fairly consistent to me to like, well, I am being honest. I am being candid. I am telling people that I don't like when you did that thing, or we're not doing this, or you're not doing this well, and it's having this effect on me. But very often we're not in a position where we're honest with ourselves, because self-reflection and practice is pretty hard going, right?
It is. And that links to the U, the next letter in human, which is uncomfortable. Because only through being uncomfortable can we change. If we stay in our comfort zone, we reinforce things as they are. But to move beyond our comfort zone is absolutely essential to be able to have the conversations that maybe we would really prefer not to have, to address the issues that actually we'd rather turn a blind eye to. And at one level, these might be insignificant little things that don't really matter. But at a bigger, more extreme scale, it leads to behaviours, approaches at work that are not just uncomfortable, but they might be altogether inappropriate. They might be immoral. And actually, Luke, I've seen it where they're illegal things going on in plain sight.
Yeah.
And there's a scale and a spectrum. And until we can find ways to have uncomfortable conversations in a way that doesn't leave everybody feeling dreadful afterwards as a result, but also doesn't tiptoe around issues that really just need to be explored and resolved, we will not change cultural norms in organisations. And so I work with people to help them learn the skills of entering into their own discomfort in a way that doesn't feel utterly terrifying or embarrassing, which then makes people feel they can speak up, speak out for the values they have in a way that is considerate to themselves, but crucially is considerate to people for whom that message might be hard to hear. Well, that's the U, uncomfortable. The M, the M is messy. Because I don't know about you, but looking at the way people work together in teams, things can often get messy. Yeah. And sometimes I walk into a team or a workplace and it feels like a live soap opera. It's like, he said, she said, wasn't me, it was them. It's, you never hear what's going on. People making up stories. It's like one episode, you see it in 10 minutes and you think, am I here for the box set? Do I really want to buy the... It's drama at work and it's messy. And that is the lived reality to some extent. But it's awful, isn't it, when teams are at loggerheads or when there's these vibes at work and it's just energy sapping and it gets in the way of us bringing our amazing skills to what we're actually there to achieve. So the group dynamic detox, which is the route out of messy, helps teams to understand where they're falling into very predictable ways of behaving that are knocking them out of collaboration, that are setting themselves up almost as if they're against each other rather than in support of each other, that are draining their energy and their emotional resources. It's almost, just without them realizing it, because they're putting so much time and energy into worrying about the dynamics and trying to make people behave differently. And so what I do is help them realize and recognize how they're all contributing to that potentially, and to offer them a choice to stop doing that and to start interacting from a different starting point. And it really, really transformational when teams start to take responsibility for their own dynamics rather than waiting for someone else to change it.
Yeah, makes sense.
That's the M.
Yep.
The A is amazing, because some of this can feel really hard work and it does involve some quite deep and difficult stuff some of the time, culture change. And yet it can have such amazing impact. And what I see so much is people at work, for all sorts of reasons, they learn over time that they maybe don't have very much power. They learn, and it's almost a norm for people to just see other people as having power. And what I do is I help people individually and then together in their teams to find their power again. Not so they can exercise it in a dominant way over other people, but so they can release their amazingness that is so often hidden or stifled, or people are too scared to really show up with their full, incredible, unique talents because they don't feel it's their place to do so, or they're not so-called senior enough, or they're not experienced enough. And once people really find their own power and learn to use it to embolden and support themselves and each other, it just opens up extraordinary opportunities for teams to do things they never thought they could do. So that's the A, amazing. And then N is for new, because this is about embedding new norms, new ways of behaving, new ways of having expectations of ourselves and others, new ways of leading, and crucially, new ways of using your power. Not to dominate and control everything all the time, but to emancipate yourself and others and to put clear boundaries around that and finding new ways of setting boundaries and holding boundaries that keep me safe and keep my colleagues safe, that care for myself and care for others. And once we are operating in that new way of working, it provides a container to enable our human needs to be met at work. And when our needs are met, we can then focus on meeting the needs of our clients, our customers, and the people who need us. So that's the H.U.M.A.N.
Yeah, okay. It gets me thinking immediately into the pattern that people perceive, which is change is hard. And
Yes.
therefore, adopting anything that is new is also perceived as hard. It
Uh-huh.
doesn't have to be, but it does require you to either adopt a new set of beliefs
Uh-huh.
or be in a position where you unlearn certain behaviors so that you can start to adopt new habits, ways of working, or team
Yeah.
rituals. Talk to us a little bit about that. Like, what are the key things from your work that you see people need to let go
Okay.
of or unlearn before they can
Yeah.
really move to the new?
And I love that unlearn, Luke, because for me, that is at the heart of some of this. I think what we don't realize is how conditioned we become, not just in workplaces about how we should behave, but actually through the way we're educated. And so unlearning feels scary, and it is so exciting when you start doing it. And so I guess the book is packed full of things to unlearn by doing mini experiments, but I guess I could highlight a couple
Yeah, please.
just to illustrate. So the first one we've maybe referred to a little bit, which is letting go of if only. So if I unlearn my habit of waiting for other people to change, and if I accept actually maybe nobody will ever change, maybe they'll all stay exactly as they are, I can still make a huge difference. So that's the sort of fundamental one. And another one of many in the book is, and this might sound a bit odd, is stop becoming a triangle.
Okay.
Stop being a triangle.
You're going to have to give me more on that.
Yeah. So what I see is that people, when they go to work, they start becoming part of a triangle, and they almost behave as if they are a triangle themselves. And what I mean by that is that they see themselves in relation to others like this, as sitting somewhere in a shape that looks a bit like that, a triangle.
Okay.
And depending on where they see themselves in that triangle, in their mental model, they then behave accordingly. So if they see themselves at what we might say the middle of that triangle, that they infer from that what that means about their value to the place, about their power, their influence, about leadership. If they see themselves at the top of the triangle, similarly, and if they see themselves at the bottom of the triangle, they behave as if that is true. And when I work with people to let themselves release themselves from the triangle being real, it's a way of thinking about our relationships.
Yeah.
It helps people compare themselves less and to really connect as peers wherever we are in the triangle. And I'm not saying hierarchy isn't part of our reality. For most people at work, in some ways, it is part of the reality, but it isn't the whole truth. And if we lock ourselves and trap ourselves to only seeing ourselves as part of that triangle, it is so self-limiting. And even if you are at the top of the triangle, it really traps you into behaving in ways that can be quite dehumanizing and disempowering for yourself and others. So be less triangle is one thing that I encourage people to learn and unlearn.
Okay,
And
got
people
you.
get very excited about it, because it's this revelation suddenly that, oh, maybe this triangle is just something we've made up because it helps us to control everything. It's not necessarily real.
Yeah, okay. If I can play it
Does
back
this
to
make
you,
any sense,
it
Luke?
does. Can I
Is
play
this
it back to
making
you
any
to
sense?
sanity check understanding, which is a triangle or a pyramid represents the organizational structure. And within that, there is a perception that you can't lead from every place within that triangle. And therefore, when you think about that in the context of your experience, um, if you sit somewhere towards the bottom of the triangle, you perceive that there is no ability to influence your experience. And therefore, you get into an if only mindset regularly because you're waiting for something to be done to you rather than stepping outside the context of the triangle, believing that you can lead from every seat in the organization and therefore shaping your experience but enriching the environment of others too. Roughly right?
Indeed. It is. And there's also a converse to that, which is that when we are working and thinking and behaving as a triangle, we look up the triangle for the answers.
Yeah.
And do you know what? That's not where they often lie.
No.
And it becomes a self-perpetuating dynamic where the more senior you become in the triangle, the more stressed you become because actually the less likely you are to know the answer, but there's more expectation that you do know the answer.
Yeah.
And so there's all sorts of problems with being a triangle, wherever you sit in it.
Yeah.
And so helping people release themselves from that belief system can be really, really energizing, and it releases new creativity, new innovation, new ways of tapping into each other's uniqueness. Because I might be the least paid person in this team, but I might have the absolutely unique experience that is needed to get us the breakthrough we're looking for.
Yeah.
Or I might be the most highly paid person and I really need help. But because I'm most highly paid person, it's really hard to ask for that help.
Yeah.
So there's all sorts of ways in which escaping from this aspect of the culture trap can really liberate teams and leaders.
Yeah, okay. It would be good then to just explore a little bit more about like how you relate the human framework back to me as an individual.
Yeah.
So in the
Okay.
context of what we talked about, which is maybe that leader that's at the top of the
Yeah.
triangle and feeling like I should have all of the answers, as an example. Or
Hmm.
someone else that sat there saying, do you know what, I really don't actually like the experience of most of my relationships. And this team feels fairly fraught.
Uh-huh.
Like, if they're that person listening,
Yeah.
how do
Yeah.
they apply the framework to
Yeah.
their working life?
Okay. So the approach that I take in the book and when I work with people is, look, this can feel overwhelming. It is so enormous that it can be paralyzing because it's like, where on earth do I start? And I might have read all the books on culture. I might have listened to so many podcasts, but what do I actually do on a Monday morning when I've got that awful meeting I've got to go to? What do I actually do, Jeanne? And so I've packed the book full of what I call mini experiments.
Okay.
And they're experiments because there is no guarantee that if you try something different, it will work.
Yep.
It might not. The key is just finding the courage to try something different in the way you respond to something. And for every aspect of the human approach, there are lots of mini experiments to try. And they're experiments that are grounded in me just choosing to behave slightly differently from the normal way I behave.
Yeah.
And that might be as something as tiny as saying nothing when I would normally give my opinion. I mean, it sounds tiny, but it's about going out, consciously thinking what I normally do in this situation is, and so what would happen if I chose to do something slightly different? What would happen if I don't start retaliating verbally when I hear something I don't agree with? What would happen if I share exactly what I'm feeling at this moment in time verbally? and I'm the person. And it's micro actions, and yet they may sound insignificant, but they, and I have seen this so many thousands of times, have such a disproportionate effect.
Yeah.
And so you have a ripple effect, and people notice. It changes the dynamics straight away. And people watch, and they may not change themselves immediately, but they will be looking and watching, and you, without realizing it, can start to then be inspiring others to have the confidence to try something a bit different. And that's where the real momentum starts to happen.
Yeah, I think often people don't realize the power that they've got to change an environment or an outcome or so on. And you've worked with thousands of leaders, as you say,
Mm.
right? So what do you notice about how people start to just reshape that environment around them? And do they know that they're doing it to begin with?
Mm.
Is it one of those that
Oh.
it's like you're consciously competent and you're doing the thing? Or is it actually you subtly try one of these experiments? And what's the feedback loop for an individual that tries one of these experiments? How do they know that it's moving in the right direction?
Well, it may move in the right direction, or it
Or may
may
not?
not.
Yeah.
And that is the key thing, is being willing and open that my mini experiment may not have the impact I'm looking for, but I only know that if I try it. If we just continue doing what we've always done, we don't learn which aspects are worth putting more energy into and which aspects are not. And I think the one breakthrough I see with people individually and when I work with them in their teams is when they realize how much of their behavior is based on what they believe they should do.
Okay.
There's this deeply held set of beliefs people have at work about what people should be doing and what I should do, what you should do. And the should things, they don't stand up to scrutiny actually a lot of the time.
Yeah.
But because everybody else is doing the shoulds, it's really hard to do something different. And when people realize they have a choice about how they behave, they have a choice about how they respond, it is hugely liberating, because it brings an ownership and a responsibility, taking responsibility for my own choices.
Yeah. What do you often find are I often think about behavior change as it comes easier when there's a state of transition. You've got
Okay.
a new job. Therefore,
Yeah.
you carry the expectation that you should behave differently.
Mm.
Or you join a
Okay.
new team and therefore so it'd be interesting to just explore a little bit like where does the catalyst for change come from? If someone's like, I want to change, the environment isn't great, I know that I want to, like, are there some transitionary states or catalysts that they can go, okay, I can attach to that because it feels more natural or it feels more normal?
I would really encourage you listening or watching this to not wait for your transition, whatever it is, but just to do this afternoon, tomorrow morning. Let's say tomorrow morning. Just decide to try it. It's as simple as that. It really doesn't need complex transitions and states of play or new eras. That actually is another way of avoiding the discomfort.
Yeah, because you can
And
kick it
my
down the road.
my gentle coaxing to you is to just take the first mini experiment and just give it a go. It's as simple as that. And that might come from a place of despair. It might come because you are an experienced person in the workplace and you are just feeling that work is sapping your energy, it's draining you, it's something you're trying to get through so that you can, get to the weekend. It might be something that is leading you to feel unwell, stressed. It might be that sort of despair. It might be even deeper than that. Or it might be that you know in your heart of hearts that you are capable of so much more individually and as a team if you could just release yourselves from just doing things the way you always do them. The hope is another real motivator. And if you hope and believe that you and your team could do even better, that is as much of an energizer to take that first step and do that first mini experiment as the despair. So whether it's hope or whether it's despair, gently hold it for yourself and use it to energize your first mini experiment, and do that tomorrow morning. You can do it. And once you've done the first one, do you know what? It gets easier.
Yeah, you have this perceived state of where you need to get to that often makes the first step the hardest one. The same with running a marathon or anything actually that you try and set out to do that is
Mm.
different. It can often feel really daunting. But if you do your first workout, or you in your next meeting take the opportunity, it gets so much easier after the first one, doesn't it?
It does. And there's something here, again, going back to honesty, Luke, is that what a lot of leaders I work with find helps is actually just being open.
Yeah,
Do you know, I'm going to try something different.
yeah,
Not pretend, not just showing up and trying to plan it all, just saying, I've been doing some thinking, I've been doing some listening and reading. And do you know what? I've just decided to try a few things differently. And I realize some of this might land really well, it might help and it might not. But if you wonder what I'm doing and why, it's because I'm sort of putting some stuff into practice. That is really, really powerful for all sorts of reasons. Partly because you can let go of worrying what everyone else is going to think.
yeah,
Secondly, because you are being authentic and open and honest. And thirdly, because you're modeling constantly being open to the fact that you could be having an even more positive impact. And people will watch that, people will be inspired by that, and people will respect your vulnerability and humility in that, which is not weak. That is really strong stuff as a leader to be doing.
yeah. I'd like to take us from a me view of the human framework to a we view of the human
Mm.
framework, and all of these elements in team dynamics are relational, and we're all humans, and
Absolutely.
therefore there is always another side or multiple other sides to any change that you try and create. For you will have impact on your relationship. So just help us understand the human framework in the context of the relationships that you have and the likely impact there too.
Sure. So for every mini experiment, there is an invitation, and all the work is invitational. We might talk about that a bit later as to why that's so important. For an individual reading the book, a leader or a person in a team to do a mini experiment themselves. And then there's a follow on, which is okay. So now, once you've done this yourself, talk about it, share it, and offer this experiment to others to give them the chance to do it as well. Invite your whole team to do it together. And that's where the real shift starts to happen. And I've seen this happen in the most extraordinary ways with teams who were at loggerheads, collectively starting to do these mini experiments and supporting and encouraging and challenging each other with them. They enter a learning space together where they absolutely embrace the fact that these experiments might work well or they might not, and we're all in this to learn together.
Yeah.
And that's where it moves from this the me to the we, from the personal to the relational. And that can then ripple across hundreds or thousands of people.
Yeah, the network effects in organizations of those kind of things can be really material, right?
Does that answer the question you're asking?
Yeah, I think so. I think I always just look at every action creates some form of reaction, right? So every
Sure.
time you change how you are, it will
Yes.
change the relationship that you have with somebody else. And therefore, as your behavior shifts, you're likely to see their behavior shift. And I think based upon your response, it's clear. Are there any other changes that you start to see based upon some of the experiments, kind of
Mm.
typical team behaviors that evolve or shape up differently when people show up differently?
I think what I notice is that it changes how people feel. When
Yeah.
they do these experiments, it changes how they feel about themselves, and also the feeling that people tell me more than anything else is they feel a sense of relief,
Mhm.
because it is giving themselves permission to stop pretending
Yeah.
that to be somebody they're not, or to pretend they know something they don't, or pretending that everything's fine when it isn't, all of this pretense that is part of our conditioned set of behaviors at work. And the relief that people tell me they feel when they adopt this approach is immense. And with that relief, it releases a new energy, because we're putting less energy into worrying about the holding up the pretense, because it takes a huge amount of energy to keep pretending
Yeah.
on a daily basis. And once you can redirect that energy away from pretending into the authentic human approach, it really gives people time and space that they didn't think they had to focus on their relationships.
Yeah, very interesting. How should people be thinking about those behaviors that, even if you have the best intentions, show up and impact trust? Honesty is one that sits right at the front of the mind for me, in how I feel honestly and how I might convey my honest opinions without perhaps the emotional intelligence or understanding of how that might impact somebody else. How do people minimize risk as they're trying to do some of these things and not have the adverse effect of great intentions?
One of the things I remind myself of sometimes, and I hope this is kind of responding to what you're inquiring about, Luke, is when you look at people's behavior, or when you notice your own behavior, most behavior is an expression of one of two things humanly. It's either a human being trying to get their needs met, trying to get the love, approval, belonging, and so on, all those human needs, trying to get my needs met. It's either that, or it's a compensation for not having those needs met.
No.
Most behaviors, almost every single one, you could argue, is an expression of one of those things. So what I encourage people to do is to try to get beyond focusing on the behavior and get into thinking about how is this a symptom? How is this behavior a symptom of somebody either trying to get their needs met or compensating for the fact their needs aren't being met? And once you can start seeing behaviors as symptoms, you can start addressing how can we help with those needs. And once we address the needs, either by meeting them more effectively in ourselves or others, or by changing the ways in which they're not being met, do you know what? Behavior change happens. But it's not because we've managed somebody's behavior. It's not because we've performance managed them on their behavior. It's not because we've bopped the behavior on the head. Well, stop doing that. All right, then I'll stop doing that. Well, it'll show up in another way. It's not because we've done that. It's because we've actually paid attention to what are the human needs underneath this behavior, individually or collectively.
Yeah, that insight, it hits me because so often I speak to people that are trying to drive cultural change, and they're driving it from the top down, and then they wonder 18 months later why it failed. And it just strikes me that if you localize it, it becomes a micro initiative rather than a macro initiative, and you're equipping managers to have more effective conversations in which they understand needs met and unmet and have autonomy to influence the outcomes over that. The scale of impact that you could create compared to diluted understanding of needs that are aggregated at an organizational level, that you then seek to drive change, that actually you can never really meet the needs of the masses anyway, because it's not personal.
Right. Sure.
So, yeah, no more than a reflection that actually there's not even a
Yeah.
question in it.
Yeah.
I just want to take, if possible, a moment just to think a little bit about experiments. You've given us the sentiment of this podcast is around culture change in action. Like, how do you
Sure.
actually get to the practicalities? And this has been absolutely jam-packed with very, very small, subtle micro changes as you talk to, but the compound and are really powerful. It would be really useful if you could just give me like the top 3 that you see have drastic impact on teams when you work with them,
Okay.
if you don't mind.
The top 3. I think there's one around shame.
Okay.
That might not be what you're expecting me to
Wasn't
say.
what I was expecting you to say, but I'm intrigued.
So much of organizational life is based on shaming,
Okay.
feeling ashamed of myself. So, therefore, giving myself a hard time, punishing myself, telling myself I'm still not good enough. I need to improve. I've got to get better. I need that promotion. I'm
Yeah.
shaming myself or shaming other people. Now, we don't get up in the morning and say, right, who can I shame today? But organizational life, because it is so predicated on 20th century or even before ways of controlling people,
Yeah.
that is visible in the way that leadership and management is still enacted. It's about controlling people. One of the ways to control people is to shame them. It's to compare them with others. It's to measure their value in relation to each other. And that is insidious. And so one of the top three, I would say, is how could you let go of shame in yourself, towards yourself, and to others? Because once we get beyond that, we can tap into a whole other level of confidence, hope, inspiration, because actually we can let go of the fear that we're not good enough. And if we can turn that around to an embracing of, and and I am as I am, and I can still grow and be even better. That transforms things. So shame would be one.
Sorry, so very, very much resonant. What becomes the experiment? Is it a case that it's a positive affirmation every time you feel that feeling? So, I am still what I am and I can still grow. Or is there um a method or an experiment that you can try at the point in which you feel that sense of shame?
Okay. So how could you speak to yourself less as a bully inside your own head and more as a coach inside your own head or as a friend inside your own head? And then how can you verbalize that with others? Because nobody tries to be a bully. And yet many people's behavior can be perceived that way. And I have recognized that in myself, that when I have felt passionate about things in the past, when I have felt angry, it comes across, it came across and used to come across in a way that could be, on the receiving end of it, feel quite bullying. And I was shocked when I realized that. But once I owned it, I could then make that choice around, well, how could I, first of all, start talking to myself in a way that isn't so bullying? How can I do that? And once I can practice that in myself, do you know what? It starts showing in the way I relate to other people. And so gentleness is not soft and fluffy. Gentleness is powerful.
Yeah. Strong. Last two?
Oh my gosh. I would say some neutral thinking. So what do I mean by that? This draws on the work of Eckhart Tolle, actually. And so let's say you are late for our call that we've booked. And I'm sitting there looking at my watch thinking, Luke is late again. He's always late. It shows how little he respects me. He doesn't have any consideration for what I'm going on. He's so arrogant. I could decide to think all of that about the fact that you're 10 minutes late. And that is so energy sapping. And you know what? Most of it is a story I'm making up in my head. So neutral thinking would sound like this. Luke hasn't turned up for my meeting. He's 10 minutes late. Fact. Neutral thinking. There could be all sorts of explanations for it. So I just choose, well, what am I going to do then? Because he hasn't turned up. Shall I stay or shall I go and get on with my day? But what I'm not doing is getting sucked into the drama that I can make up for myself, which actually really gets in the way of relationships. So neutral thinking sounds really small, but it is massively powerful. And I get feedback all the time when I introduce this to people. They start realizing how much of their life they're making into a soap opera at work and how much of their energy that's stealing away and how much it's leading to assumptions about other people, often not very benevolent assumptions. And then we wonder why we end up with tension and fractious sort of self-defensive behaviors between each other. So neutral thinking's a really powerful one. And I think the other one might take us back to where we started, actually, which is let go so much of your job title and really learn to express who you are in terms of what what difference you want to make. So I work with teams of people to embolden them to behave differently together so they can get even better work done. That's what I do. And somebody listening to that will either think, oh, well, that's fine, good for Jeanne, but she can't help me. I don't need her in my work. Or, oh, gosh, Jeanne's someone I really need to talk to. Or I might be able to help Jeanne. But because I've said what I'm here trying to achieve, it gives people something to work with. It also influences people in a way by standing here and saying, I'm a vice president of SDC in the directorate of
Yeah.
Momentum.
Yeah.
Right? What was that?
Exactly that.
So it's a little bit of a more light-hearted one, but when I work with leaders on this, we play with it, we have a bit of fun with it, and people realise how nonsensical a lot of their job titles are, how utterly meaningless they are for most people.
Yeah.
And once you can let go of being attached to those and really get to the heart of what am I here to do? And that might be different in different contexts. On a meeting on a Monday morning, I might be here for a slightly different purpose in terms of what I can offer than that one-to-one I'm having on a Friday with a colleague. So yeah, just letting go of the job titles as being so much a part of your identity is maybe something to go away and try. How would you introduce yourself tomorrow without using your job title?
Great. That is brilliant. Thank you. Jeanne, thank you ever so much. This has been really, really useful. And the conversation's got my mind whirring and lost in it, which is so enjoyable. I want to close out now with the last couple of questions. The first is, when you wrote the book, was it an unlock for you, or did you have ambitions that it would unlock for others too? And if somebody's stuck there in the culture trap, what do you hope the book does for them?
It completely freed me from that state I described earlier on into a sense of ease with who I am in the world and what I'm here to do that I've never had before. So yes, it unlocked me. And I, because it has been so powerful for me and all the teams and leaders that I used it with, I absolutely believe that this is a route to create a new sense of power. Not power to control other people, but power to make your biggest difference. And the agency and the choice that this offers to people, whoever they are, whatever role they're in, or even if they're not even in a job and they're desperate to try and find a job. I've worked with people in that situation with it as well. So yes, it was first and foremost therapy for me.
Yeah.
And I get told it's therapeutic for individual leaders and their teams, which has been astonishing to me to hear.
Right. And if someone has listened and said, wow, Jeanne is amazing, I would love to follow your work or even work with you, where's the best place to connect with you?
So betheculturechange.co.uk or Be the Culture Change on YouTube or Dr. Jeanne Hardacre on LinkedIn. I think there's only one of me, thankfully.
No, what a lovely position to be in. I Googled myself the other day, and only because I needed a picture of my LinkedIn, I think it was. And I was like, God, there's loads of us.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
There's only one unique you, though,
Yeah,
Luke.
yeah, indeed. Indeed. So we do this thing on the podcast, which is we take a question from a past guest. So they have no context of who this is going to be asked to. It's quite a nice way of helping understand some of the areas of culture change that they're intrigued by. So I have one for you, which is, how do you ensure on-site and team members who aren't directly in a corporate office setting still feel included in a cultural heartbeat of the organization? I'm also intrigued.
Mm.
Part B to that question is, how would you apply the H.U.M.A.N framework?
This might feel like a bit of a provocative response, but I suppose the word that stands out to me in all of that is ensure, because I don't think you can ensure that anybody feels anything.
Okay.
And I think that letting go of this need to make people feel how you want them to feel sounds rather odd. And yet I've seen the power it has when people let go of that as a leader and replace it with something else, which is, do you know what? Every human being has the right to feel how they feel. They have a right to feel excluded or not as much not acknowledged if that's their lived experience. And the belief that we can make everybody feel included, or we can make everybody feel as if they're part of the cultural heartbeat of the organization, we can do lots of things to invite them into that and to keep those doors open by trying to understand what their needs are and being honest about what needs can and can't be met. But what we can't do is ever ensure everybody thinks or feels or does one thing. That is a controlling way of going about things. And a more liberating way of doing it would be to be absolutely mindful at all times of how, with my best of intentions to include people, I probably will be excluding people without even realizing them, and constantly keeping that radar on around how is my best of intentions potentially having the opposite effect. I think that's the most valuable way of ensuring that everybody has their chance to play their part.
Yeah, great answer. So, one tech tool that you can't live without in your work.
My webcam. Look, it follows me
It's a
around.
great webcam, I've got to be honest. The next is the moment that you look at with the most amount of joy in your career.
It was in July this year. I finished working with a team who had literally been at loggerheads, and what they were doing was patient work, really precision patient diagnostic work, and it was starting to be really affected badly by their team dynamics. And I walked away from them in July, having worked with them for 7 months, applying the human approach, and they don't need me anymore.
Okay.
And that, oh my gosh, the feeling of joy that I have given them what they need to escape from that toxic environment and to create something new for themselves so they can do their better work for patients. You can't get better than that.
No, I agree completely. A thinker, author, or book that has
Oh,
influenced your approach to organizational culture. You can say
mm.
your own.
Oh well, that apart, I have to say Barry Oshry, who is little known, maybe compared with many of the gurus. He's about 94 now and
Okay.
is still alive and kicking. And he, with his Seeing Systems work, has been possibly one of the most influential people for me in my thinking and in my practice and in my own professional personal development.
Very cool. A culture trend that you're most excited about right now.
Young people. I have 3 young adults that I've brought into the world and brought up, and they're contemporaries, and people under 35, they're only in their early 20s. They are my inspiration, and they are what I am so excited about because they don't just suck stuff up. They don't just accept the way things are. And whilst that might be tricky to deal with, it is absolutely the energy for change that is gonna save this world.
Yeah, indeed. And then very last question is we ask one question that you would love to ask the next guest. Don't know who they are, but anything that you would love to hear a response to in relation to creating culture change.
Okay. So my question is, if you let go of your need to judge other people as right, wrong, good, or bad, and accept everybody's imperfectly human and amazing, what possibilities could that create in your leadership and your teams?
Great question and a great ending to what has been. I honestly have really, really, really enjoyed the conversation. And how long this is probably an indication of the fact that I have got
I've loved it
completely
too.
lost in it. So
Yeah, I've loved it, Luke. Thank you so
good.
much for it.
Thank you ever so much for your time, and go check Jeanne out because she's been amazing. Thank
Keep in
you.
touch.
I will do.
Bye.
If you found today's conversation valuable, we'd love if you follow us, rate us, or review the show. It really helps others find us. And if you're feeling inspired, share this episode with someone who's passionate about building a better workplace. We'll be back soon with more stories from people leaders putting culture into action. See you again next time.